Hello, my name's Graham Mackenzie. I'm the Artistic Director of HCMF, Huddersfield Contemporary Music Festival. And welcome to the latest in our series of artist-to-artist conversations. All of these conversations will be available in what is a growing archive on the HCMF website. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined for this conversation by someone who's been a long-time inspiration, and in recent years I'm very privileged to be able to call him a friend, Alvin Curran. Alvin Curran is an American composer, performer, improviser, sound artist and writer, currently based in Rome. He is the co-founder of the legendary and groundbreaking Musica Electronica Viva, who I had the great pleasure of inviting and presenting at hcmf a few years ago. And I can say with hand in heart, in all honesty, the concert was one of my favourite concerts if I look back on my time as director at HCMF. And amongst the HCMF team, I have to say the concert was great, but the post-concert discussion between Alvin and his co-founders, Fred Rajetsky and Richard Titelbaum, has taken on legendary proportions. And it was such a great chat afterwards. Alvin Curran's music makes use of electronics and environmental found sounds. There are too many great works to mention. I'll just pick out a couple of my favourite and personal highlights. Maritime Rights, a series of performances on water. His large-scale piano work, Inner Cities. And for a genre that I don't normally take to, saxophone quartets, then Electric Rags 2 is probably the best saxophone quartet ever, in my humble opinion. And there's a lovely, lovely statement on Alvin Curran's website where he describes himself as being dedicated to the restoration of dignity to the profession of making non-commercial music as part of a personal search for future social, political and spiritual forums. Wise and beautiful words indeed. Alvin, welcome. Welcome to this discussion.
Thank you, and thank you for the beautiful words that consist of this welcome.
And Alvin's joined today by another great artist, Leafcutter John, a name apparently acquired when one of his friends compared his creativity and industriousness to that of a leafcutter ant. John's style is based in computer music and use of samples of everyday sounds, but also has its roots as a folk musician. And I think that's very telling in John's work, which gives it that great sense of humanity and connection. It's music that's I find very easy to connect to in a very meaningful way. And I think that's evidenced in John's latest work, which was a commission by HCMF and Leeds Art Gallery during the endless lockdown that we've all experienced. The work was Lockdown Patchwork, and John really weaved together, facilitated, curated into a beautiful cohesive piece, field recordings from people who submitted from all over the world of their own connections to nature during the lockdown. And that work, I think you can hear, it's still available on John's YouTube channel. And I would advise anyone who's not heard it to check it out. It was a beautiful work. And John, it's lovely to see you again. We've been in contact lots over the last few weeks while we were in months putting together Lockdown Patchwork, but it's certainly been one of the things that I've found a great inspiration during these past months. So thank you, and welcome to this conversation. So in time-honored fashion in these events, I'm going to switch off my camera, I'm going to disappear, and I'm going to listen intently to a conversation that I'm very, very excited about. So thank you both, and great to have you both back at an HCMF event. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, it's just me and you now, Alvin.
I'm ready.
You've got your tam-tam as well.
You have what? I'm sorry?
I'm looking at your tam-tam.
Oh,
Your gong.
my gong. Where?
Yeah, you've got one behind you.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, I forgot. Well, here. Well, I mean, it's being damped by the wall. Yeah, this is my studio. I see that just on my left, you can't see it. There's a MIDI keyboard of mine, and I see you have similar. You're presumably sitting in your own studio, right?
Yeah, I've got a studio in my house.
That's wonderful. This is also in my house, in right in the center of Rome, about 200 meters from the Colosseum, if you can imagine that space, which living here, you're living in a double world, because you can be inside of your head in your own space, in your own home, as one lives pretty much each day. As soon as you step outside, you're in an entirely different world, and you're immediately in touch with not just the relics and the ruins and the magnificent monuments that have become of these objects, but you're in this world which is yeah, I mean, historically it's around 2000, 2200, 2300 years old, which is incomprehensible in terms of our time. But you're not only a stone's throw from it, you're right in it. I mean, you're right in the middle of it, just as the Romans were then. And I'm going to just say something, because I'm just sort of spinning off on the top of my head about location and about locus and place. And for the longest time, living here meant nothing to me. I was an American brat, a young brat who got here 25 years of age, and literally with a fistful of dollars. And in the sense that I had enough money to last me 1 year. At that time, living in Rome was considered an easy feat, because one could live on $1 a day. I'm speaking of 1965. So it's a long time ago. It's well over 50 years, and I managed to make this thing last. But I just wanted to let you know, because I don't know how much you really know about me and my music, that one important thing that we really do share, aside from our electronics and found sounds and field recordings and so on, is my roots in popular music. And that begins as a child playing in dance bands and jazz bands. I mean, at the age of 12 and 13 and 14, and went on to actually consider a career as a jazz pianist in my teens. And Uh, but when I got to Italy, speaking of money, as I was just a minute ago, um, I found myself having that need to work, and immediately I found myself playing solo piano in a in a famous cocktail lounge in Rome, with with the clientele of mostly people from Cinecittà and all of the great film people and other characters in and around that business, and so I was just another entertainer, as it were, playing uh, popular standard songs, uh, and that would include in my recognition the stuff of Cole Porter and George Gershwin and Harold Arlen, Kurt Weill, and so on and so forth. So coming from that area, and then on I'm just giving this little background just so that you get a grasp on places I've been uh, musically, other than the official ones which appear uh, in any one of my CVs or histories or whatever. And because when I think back on these things, it's just those roots in people's music that have, I think, contributed to something really special, much in the way as it has with people like Terry Riley and Lamont Young, and who were all jazz musicians, and in the right around this time, I'm speaking now of the middle 60s, and then the quick coming together of colleagues and friends in Rome, who then became this, what is now considered well-known group of Musica Elettronica Viva, who got together to make music spontaneously with any means possible, any means, acoustic, electric, or other. I don't know what the other is, but anything that could make sound, and that was our basic principle. But as this group came into being, in the summers, I was called quite quickly to go to Florence to play the piano with a banjo band that consisted of 3 professional banjoists, a tuba, a drummer, and myself playing the piano with tacks on the hammers. I don't know if you know that technique. Yeah, that you could even call it a prepared piano to give that really clanging sound. It was an upright piano on stage. Anyway, so I just wanted to underline a little bit these important spaces in my own life, which because among other things, these banjo virtuosos who I thought, hey, we're just playing On Top of Old Smoky, or You Are My Sunshine, or whatever these sing-along tunes that we had to play every night. But these guys were they were amazing musicians, all 3 of these banjoists. And I sort of put that, immediately sort of brushed that off and said, okay, I'll just sit there and do my thing and, play all the right chords and do everything right. But in retrospect, and from my from a distance of nearly 50 years, I see that some of events and experiences, like playing in the middle of a sing-along banjo band, were possibly, almost certainly, more important to me than my studies with the great composer Elliott Carter. Now, I mean, if Carter were alive and heard that, he would laugh. He'd have a good laugh at that. But I also remain friends with him for the rest of his life, which lasted until he died a few years ago at the age of 104. Anyway, that said, I'm going to shut up, and and because I don't even have any questions for you.
That's
And I'll tell you why I don't have a question. The first piece I heard of yours was the lockdown. Sorry, what was the right title?
the Lockdown Patchwork.
The Lockdown Patchwork, and the word patchwork, of course, has great significance to me for other reasons, which I won't go into now. But let's call that the first work I heard of yours, and I did actually. I heard a part of it the other day, but today I heard it from beginning to end, and what can I say? It knocked my socks off.
Oh, thank you.
Really, it was not only a work of sonic imagination to the highest degree, and a great piece of music. It spoke to me now, 14 months after the lockdown, which had a shocking and traumatic effect on me, which I only can appreciate right now. It spoke to me in a direct and illuminating way, and I mean, so yeah, I will ask you a question, a couple of questions. Did the contributing voices, these spontaneous interviews that you ask, obviously certain people, did you know them all?
No, so the way that the piece started was that I asked for the public that we could reach to send in recordings that they'd made. So it started with field recordings. And then it was really clear to me that, well, one thing was clear, that I thought I couldn't make a piece out of just these field recordings alone, because it didn't.
Spoken word.
Well, at that point, there was no idea of spoken word. And I thought, what's missing here is people's actual reactions to what's been going on. So I just approached a few people, and then I thought it's really important for me to reach outside the people that I know, because we all exist in our kind of spheres, however wide or not they are. So some of the people I asked had suggestions for other people, like the lady who starts the piece talking about her garden, Zakia Mackenzie. She was suggested by someone else in the piece.
That knocked me out, particularly because I'm a gardener.
She's amazing. She's an amazing woman. It's interesting because each one of those people, what they do professionally is amazing, but also I really like that we didn't talk about any of that stuff. We just talked, I just said, we started the interview, and I just said, "What have you been doing in lockdown? How's it going?" You know,
Yeah.
just I wanted personally, I wanted something friendly to happen between me and another person.
Mm.
And the interviews sort of come out of that, you know, either continuing that friendship or building a friendship in the case of Zakia. So yeah, they were, I think I interviewed like 8 or 9 people, and they were they were an hour long, and I edited down to like 7 minutes around that. And there's a whole variety of people with different kind of backgrounds and different interests and different lifestyles involved, you know, in that selection of people. And as soon as I had that stuff edited down, it made the arc of the piece itself, more or less. I just had these 8 or 9 sections to it, and then just arranged them.
Yeah, that was quite clear. Yeah. Can I ask you now knowing that these interviews were submitted from a call, as it were, what about the accompanying or interlocking ambient sounds that appear very beautifully structured and composed with each individual?
So
do they belong to that individual, or do they come from your imagination?
In my imagination, they belong. So I feel like so basically the idea was I wanted to write some music for that person, for that conversation. So I think you get a sense of the kind of tonality, melody, and rhythm of a person's voice.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of subtly feeds into the music. And I sort of basically try not to use frequencies that are in that person's spoken voice. So I try and write around it. And some of it's quite illustrative. So there's times where I stop the interview, and then there's a kind of metaphysical thing happens. So maybe I'm trying to write what I imagine that person's thinking, or if there's some unstated thing, I'm trying to illustrate that sometimes. But it's you know, it's kind of quite a selfless bit of music, and it's really different to music I would have written 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, this is in having then gone back and listened to some of your stuff from 10 years earlier. I can see exactly what you're saying, where you were, well, you had a focus on beats, on looped, sometimes unlooped melodic fragments and stuff. I don't know. Are you a guitarist, by the way, or a keyboardist primarily?
I'm a very bad keyboardist. I'm a kind of okay guitarist, but not particularly good.
But the guitar that appears in some of your pieces, is that you playing?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know what you listen to, but there's like, basically when I listen to your music, I took a piece from each decade and just had it and had a listen to it. And if you take a piece of mine, I mean, I've been doing music for 20 years. So if you take it every 5 years, I think they all sound quite different.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I was really trying to thrill myself with exploring sound, and it was very internal. And I was very interested when so I started out, and I wasn't trained in music, and I didn't even want to be a a musician. So I was just playing with a very early computer, just sort of thrilling myself. And really fascinated, just following those fascinations. And it was only when I heard De Natura Sonorum by Bernard Parmigiani that I realized that that electronic music could be a completely different thing, could be, you know, epic and beautiful and detailed and textured, and it didn't have to be like, you know, electronic music that I'd heard before. Didn't have to be full of beat, didn't have to dance to it.
Yeah, I'm sorry for laughing, but that laugh isn't a laugh of agreement.
Yeah, I mean, this ironically now I think a very beautiful thing would be to be able to write music to dance to when we all come out of this bloody pandemic, you know.
I agree. I agree with that too, and I think that I mean, I've been sort of formulating an idea, kind of a strange idea, because it comes out of the strangeness of my of living an artistic life on the edges, if not in the center of what is commonly called the avant-garde, and then waking up one day and finding this avant-garde might have died already years ago before I was aware of it, and so and then coming back to what I said right from the beginning, having musical roots both in classical music as a kid, and then in popular, especially in jazz, and the jazz of the 1950s, and then right on into I would say early 60s and 70s, which became a revolutionary period in jazz, where jazz itself exploded into volcanically, as it were, into so many rivers of interesting and creative creative processes. So what I'm getting here to is this feeling of identity with you, who have completely other background, and not and one which I find absolutely admirable in your description of not even wanting to call yourself a musician for a certain period in your life. I'm sure that's changed now, but
you know what, it hasn't really.
Yeah, oh really? Good for
No.
you.
And it's interesting because when I knew we were talking, I wanted to listen to your music, obviously, and when I listened to your music, I didn't think, oh, this is avant-garde music. I just thought, oh, this is music. This is not. It's not, to me.
I take that as the highest compliment. I'm serious.
Well, why would it be? I mean, it seems like well, I put it this way, I could listen to your music over 4 or 5 decades. So it was like, it's like, wow, this is absolutely amazing. And
I wrote the same piece over and over again.
Well, it doesn't sound like the same piece, but
I'm just joking.
It's yeah, I was delighted listening to it. The first thing I listened to was from let's see, look at my notes. Songs and Views from the Magnetic Garden 2. Which I think is that the 80s or 70s?
That's 70s, early 70s.
Yeah, and I was listening to it and thinking, I was thinking, I can hear something about this, which is like, some of it sounds American. And then I was thinking there's a European element to this. And but you must have been in Italy at that point then.
I was. It was actually, it was my, that piece was a kind of launching pad for my entire career in Italy and in general, because I presented that piece in a small basement theater for I think it was 10 consecutive nights. The place was filled, and that piece it just happened to be my launching pad, and it immediately got me recognition. It got me a lot of work. It got me primed to make a career around my own abilities to be a solo performer, that I could just walk out and do anything. I could do, here, I mean, I'll give you an example. Just take this instrument I have in my hand. Just a piece of crummy corrugated plastic that they use for electrical wiring. And you know, this is the I was determined right from the start to be able to make music with anything, any found object, any sound,
Yeah.
any piece of junk, and it's all that Songs and Views of the Magnetic Garden is a kind of a nutshell of a lot of the work of mine that followed, excluding some of the, you know, there are numbers of chamber pieces and pieces for a solo piano, and then there's orchestral works and stuff like that. Not a whole lot. I didn't follow that path, that composerly path, to the bitter end, as many composers do, but that's all they do. As a, you know, and you know, my ability to actually go out and just find a piece of junk like this corrugated thing, you know, gave me the license, as it were, to be able to make music literally with anything.
Yeah.
And I feel that profoundly in your work, and because you look everywhere, your ears and eyes are focused on just those things and places. You know, it just could be your own footsteps. It could be anything. It could be walking in a puddle. It could be, you know, just some raindrops that happen to be, you know, hitting on some resonant aluminum roof, or some metal object, or a hubcap which has fallen somewhere, just at random, and boom, there's sudden music waiting for you to make it, to turn it into your music. And this is what especially really gave me a special feeling of affinity with your work when I listened to the entire Lockdown Patchwork. And I may add, going to a place which is a difficult place, because when you use spoken word, the specificity of the spoken word is such that it it sometimes defies its own inherent musical content. But somehow I could turn off my hearing, as it were, as to the meaning of these words, and just listen to those voices as just some other sound. And
Oh,
yeah, and and how you integrated in a dialogue. I mean, you might have someone saying, well, puttering around in my garden, and then boom, and then, something like, I don't know, like a sound comes out of nowhere, for no reason. Uh, uh, and, I don't know whether, you hit a wooden keg, or someone got shot, or there was a car crash, or I don't know what, but these things kept happening. And I say, man, this is a beautiful dialogue between uh, spoken sound and and musical ambient sounds. So
no, I'm really pleased that
I'm going to let you talk on that one.
well, I was enjoying being praised. It was nice. Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that, because there's it's arrangement on the scale of actually quite a big orchestral piece. There's lots of layers going on.
Well, listen, it's 60 minutes is a serious piece of music. And
Yeah, I mean, it just grew to that length by
it could have
itself.
kept going.
It could have, but I promised them a 20-minute piece of music, so I was worried that it might be. I end up giving them a two-day piece, which there's so much editing in that piece. It took me. I think it damaged my eyes. Actually, it was so much computer usage. So there were, I think it's a good length as it is, and yeah, I'm thinking about. For me, it's a lot of stuff resonates from what you said. It's very difficult using spoken word. I've never used stuff where people have been speaking such personal truths and sort of testimony, which I feel like I don't want to mess about with. Usually any sound is fair game, and even if I'm producing a band, then I have to sort of in the kindest possible way lose respect for the integrity of it in order to remake it in a different way, to sort of reform it. But when I was listening to your stuff, when I was listening to the Magnetic Garden, I was delighted because I was hearing there's parts where there's sort of a synthesizer appears and starts.
It's VCS3.
Is it?
Yeah.
I know it well.
That's antediluvian.
But it's really nice, and then suddenly, you get a bit of a field recording set, sort of, or a recording that's obviously of a space, or and some of those juxtapositions we're making were like, I was thinking, I would have done that. That's what I would have done, or something similar. And I was thinking, this is
great.
This is so beautiful to hear. And I was thinking, I know lots of people that will get a lot out of this music. So I was just sending messages, just saying, you should listen to this. It's what you're trying to do, but it was, a little while ago.
A little while ago, like 45 years ago.
I mean, I don't know how, do you feel when you listen back to those things?
Yeah.
Like when I listen back to my first stuff, which was 20 years ago, I think there's a sort of naive charm to it. And there's a kind of, it's interesting what you're saying about right at the beginning about your appreciation for playing in that banjo group, which wasn't there at the time, but now the importance of it is you know, it's that sort of stuff is formative. It goes in you and it never leaves. I think.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah. Well, yeah. I could go off on that endlessly, but and I might also add to that there's probably even in my most uh, um, let's say so-called serious chamber music and stuff like that, there's hardly a moment, there's hardly a composition where I don't sneak in, not for postmodern irony sake, but just because you know you've done something or done something else, and it's all some weird, disconnected this and that, and then suddenly out of that comes a simple tune out of nowhere, and I can't be musically honest without that simple tune being somewhere, uh, beginning, end, or whatever, in a piece of mine. And you're absolutely right in saying that, you know, it really, I mean, just to reconfirming what I said earlier about, you know, this experience of really playing what uh, you can honestly call people's music. Uh, uh, and it isn't something that I followed up on because until very recently, incidentally, I'll add just a little sidebar to that, because I did break away. I mean, I didn't play piano bar anymore, and I left, you know, I did do a few early on. I'm speaking now of early Rome period, late 60s, early 70s, when I did have to work. And so I did, I was doing a lot of small animated film pieces and, you know, just making quick soundscapes for people in theater and so on. But I I didn't follow through in my own life with the uh, continued use, and I continued um, working as a jazz or as an arranger, which I easily could have done for films and theater and stuff like that. So that said, I really took up, and this is based on this little moment of launching with the magnetic garden that you mentioned, because I suddenly became me, and and the me was a working me who then didn't have to go do these other gigs with not lesser music, music of lesser importance, but you know, I just didn't have to make commercial music. And even though at times I continue to do so, very little. But um, I'm sorry, I lost my I lost my way in this roundabout thing. But you had started off something, and then I cut into it. And
well, I went with you, and I think we're both lost now. So it's interesting that, I mean, because you talk about not having to make commercial music, and I think that if my music, I can imagine a parallel universe where my music would be more commercial, and I'd honestly be totally fine if that was the case. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think those things become extremely popular in the masses. In fact, like YouTube and things like that have allowed certain things to become popular. And I remember there was a thing over the last few years called ASMR, which is a kind of like it's people doing extremely quiet sounds
Oh yeah.
for a long time. And it's essentially kind of like stuff that I've seen Steve Beresford do in the London Improvisers Collective, and people like that, just doing kind of, they're manipulating objects to make sounds to make people feel a certain way, which is the same as a jazz band. And so I've got a quite simplistic and reductive mind about music, and for me personally, I'm someone who has ideas that I want to realize, and whatever tools it takes to realize them, whether it's music or an animation or a drawing or a conversation, that's totally cool. That's why I don't really care too much about being called a musician or a whatever. I think just, to me, it's like a very important internal need.
I know exactly what you're talking about. If I may pick up on that, I'm actually involved in a complex situation right now, which is really smack in the middle of this discussion. That is, I've been hired by a very prominent organization in Stuttgart. It's the opera, but they also have they have a series of avant-garde contemporary theater pieces, and so this is the second time they've called on me to do a theater piece, and with a director, Achim Freier, with whom I've worked now several times, and we get along great. I'm just going to tell this little story because it's really appropriate. It is the hardest piece of music I've ever been involved in creating. I'm just saying creating in the sense I usually would just say compose, but this is a creation. And the reason is the theme of this is it's based on Molière's Don Juan, or which is basically the same story of Don Giovanni of Mozart, the Mozart opera, and so there's one outstanding instrument in the Mozart opera, which is the mandolin, which is actually played live by, what's his name? I forget the character, but anyway, in Don Giovanni. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll definitely do something with the mandolin, even though I've never written a note for that instrument. Doesn't matter. It's the same, basically the same fingering as a violin, and I mean, I can deal with that. Same range or whatever. But then I said, well, I'll just put my electronic stuff, put it into my electronic mixer. And I mean mixer in the sense like a food mixer, food grinder, and we'll come up with some really good stuff. And so this went on, and I ended up making 4 versions of the music because they said no, we can't have, and it came to the end finally when it became clear to the director that he only wanted an acoustic mandolin on stage played by one actor. I said, fine. So if you find an actor who can play the mandolin, great. And so they said they did. And then I went ahead and I actually wrote, I mean, composed on paper, because someone had to learn this stuff. And it had to be very simple because the performer was going around and speaking his lines, and then had to, quickly go and do a musical thing and then go back and speak lines. It was really a complex. So just the other day, I was speaking, it was a meeting on Zoom, and it came out that their actor mandolinist was a former guitarist who can play the guitar in some way, but B, who doesn't read music. And so I said, oh my God, I said, this is, I mean, what's going to happen here? I mean, I'm basically under contract to come up with, I've already written the music, and they said the music sounds great and we like it, but then they have a player who can't play it. So I'm I'm just telling this story because I'm, for the first time in my life, in a professional situation where I don't have a solution, and I'm thinking, I don't know, that the theater people will have to come up with something.
Is this ongoing, this situation?
Well, it isn't ongoing for very long because the piece opens on the 19th of June.
Guitarists can read tablature though, usually.
Yeah, but yeah, and I mean, this isn't about chords and melody. This is all, it's all monophonic. I mean, a lot of it is on open strings or when possible, but it's real music written out for this instrument, which is a terrifyingly simple but difficult instrument to deal with, unless you happen to be a mandolin virtuoso, which there are very few in the world.
I did a piece called Mandolin Work about not being able to play the mandolin, basically.
Oh man, send it over.
I will do. It's really interesting. It's exactly what we've been talking about. It's like about 10 minutes kind of a kind of electroacoustic exploration, and then it just goes into a folk song at the end.
Oh, beautiful. Well, listen, if you want to create a co-authored project, we could probably. I'd love to hear this thing.
We could do a duo album called Problem Mandolins.
Or mandolin problematics.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be good. I once came to work in Italy, in Rome, actually not far from where you are. And I came, there's an artist from Napoli who was living in Rome, and he was doing really well on the sort of international art circuit, and he was making, well, the Neapolitan council wanted to make a documentary about him because they were so proud about him. And they started making it. He was very uneasy about it. And he managed to convince them to let him direct the documentary. And the first thing he did was replace himself with someone else in the film. And then he slowly turned the film into a horror movie.
Wow.
Which is kind of amazing and genius. And this guy, we were in contact like 15 years ago, and he said, I love your music, and I want someone to do the music for this film. He told me about the film. I thought, that sounds ridiculous. I want to be involved. He said, I've got no money, but I'll fly you over to Rome and you can have anything you want. And I said, well, this is what I want. I want to drive around in a convertible Alfa Romeo the whole time. and I want to eat nothing else but the finest tiramisu. And he provided those two things. And we did this really crazy movie in like an attic in right in the center in Rome. It's amazing.
I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it.
You wouldn't. It's terrible. It really,
Oh, really?
is bad.
No, it could be terrible. Can be good. It can be great.
It can be. It can also be really bad.
Yeah. Listen, I'm just seeing that we're up to 50 minutes now. Do we want to? I don't know if we. I think they said we can go to an hour. Is that right?
Oh, I don't know. I think Tamsin will reappear, and then.
Oh, she will. Okay, all right.
And
I just see that we're a little over 50 minutes, 50 something minutes. But anyway, yeah, well, this connection is, I mean, this mandolin thing has been driving me nuts. Actually, I'm good friends with Fred Frith. You must know.
yeah, I mean, I don't know him personally, but
Yeah.
I think amazing
Yeah.
musician.
Oh, he's fantastic. And just yesterday he said, look, I told him what the problem was. And he said, look, I know the two best mandolin players in the world, and they both live, you know, a few miles from Stuttgart. So anyway, he put me in touch with maybe that could be some solution. But yeah, and this film, this Neapolitan thing sounds great. What happened after you ate all that tiramisu?
Well, it's interesting because you made me think about it as soon as when you started speaking about right at the beginning. You said about the different worlds of this, the in your head in the studio world, and then you're outside and you're in this Italy, which is got the ruins and you know, it's a historical thing, and it's also a very vibrant and full-on city. It's very passionate, and there's lots of, I mean, it's just a very intense in lots of different ways. And I've got a funny story about the mental world of composing. So I was, like any film with no budget, we had maybe a week to do the entire music for the film. And it was really hot. And by the end of it, I was in front of the computer in my underpants, just sweating and working hours and hours and hours trying to finish this film. And then they had to edit some footage on my left. And then I'm just like, got my headphones on. And I'm working, and I can sense some disturbance behind me, but I'm really busy, so I'm just carrying on. And then I turn around, and there's two policemen with guns in this tiny room.
Oh my God!
And I've never gone from the internal to the external world so abruptly. It was like, what the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
And there was some guy had broken into one of these houses, and he was running. You know, the roofs are all connected in these.
Yeah. You know.
So they ran out, and they were out with these guns, kind of shooting over the roof. It was pretty intense.
A great movie.
Yeah, I mean, the movie, it's called Killer Shrimps, and it's the artist
Killer Shrimps.
Yeah, the artist is a really brilliant artist called Pierre Golier. Yeah, and he set up an art school in LA, which is sounds like an amazing school, very connected to lots of areas where art education doesn't usually tread. So quite
definitely look him up.
Yeah, he's a brilliant man. But yeah, I mean, I feel honored that to hear about your process, and to know that what I felt when I listened to your music, these things that resonated and made me happy, like these little kind of sound composerly sparks of joy that we get when we make a thing. Your pieces were giving me those sparks that I give myself when I write stuff, and I thought, oh, there's definitely something here. So I think Graham did a good job putting this together, to be honest.
I think so too. I really salute Graham and Tamsin, and I think oh, incidentally, I just wanted to say one last word to you, by the way, that as I was in Berkeley, California, as a kind of hostage, that is a year ago, over a year ago, I was a hostage there for 3 months because my wife and I couldn't return to Rome. So I also began a piece. I began the piece. It's unfinished. It's called the Containment Etudes. And what I did was basically I took at the moment, my setup, my keyboard setup, where I have about 3,000 sound files, all mapped in varying groups to an 88 MIDI keyboard, and I began just selecting, 2 or 3 sounds only, and just making very short pieces. And so I went ahead with this thing like a whirlwind and made about 60 little pieces. I'm going to send you some just so that you have them. We'll have a few different things. If you want to use them in any way, in any future work, they're yours.
Oh, so, that's very generous. I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, well, you will. I mean, I'll get
when you say sounds, are they kind of all sorts of, are they things that you
anything
recorded?
from anywhere, anything from an insect to huge explosions or even musics from parts of the world that haven't been discovered yet. They sound like it. But in any case, it's been a great pleasure meeting you, both musically and personally, and I hope we again thanking Graham and Tamsin, and I'm just looking forward to meeting you in person.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, let's do that. Could be
well,
Rome.
I'd love to come to Rome again. It's been a long time.
Well, when things get cranked up again here, I'm sure there'll be an occasion.
And you're always welcome in Sheffield if you like. If you like the countryside, it's a very beautiful place to go.
I do indeed. So be well, and till then.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yeah, take care.